Dark space stretched endlessly, cold and silent, until alien salvage lights pierced the void. The Calith crew had seen countless derelicts in their decades of scavenging, but this one felt different. The ship's hull bore no markings, no identifiable origin, just smooth metal that their scanners couldn't properly date. Inside, they found a single cryo-pod, its systems still humming with power, despite the dead vessel around it. Commander Vesh approached cautiously, her 4 eyes narrowing as she studied the figure within humanoid, primitive-looking, yet perfectly preserved. She ordered the medical team forward, expecting another corpse for the archives. But when they cracked the seal and drew his blood, the scanner results flashed in glowing glyphs that made no sense. DNA profile, no match in the galactic database, not similar to unknown species, not corrupted data, simply ... nothing. No ancestors, no relatives, no evolutionary tree. Outside the medical bay, the ship's holding pens erupted in chaos. Carnivorous beasts they'd captured for transport began slamming against reinforced barriers, but not in hunger. In fear, the Zarath predators, apex hunters that had terrorized colonies, pressed themselves against the back walls of their cages, eyes fixed on the medical bay door. One managed to crack its containment and charge toward the lab, only to skid to a halt at the threshold. Hackles raised, a sound between a growl and a whimper escaping its throat. It recognized something the aliens couldn't see. The man's eyes opened without warning or confusion, piercing blue cutting through the sterile light. His breathing came steady and controlled. Not the panicked gasps of someone waking from centuries of sleep, but the measured calm of a soldier, checking his surroundings. The medical staff stumbled backward, instruments clattering to the floor. He sat up slowly, every movement deliberate, and when his gaze swept the room, several crew members felt their survival instincts scream at them to run. He didn't speak, didn't ask where he was or what had happened. He simply observed, taking in the alien faces, the technology, the frightened predators beyond the glass. Then he tilted his head slightly, and the Zaroth that had broken free lowered itself to the ground, belly exposed in submission. Commander Vesh activated her emergency beacon, her voice shaking as she transmitted to the Galactic Council. "We've found something that doesn't exist in any database, but every predator in our hold knows exactly what it is." The council chamber filled within hours. Representatives from 100 worlds gathering in person or through holographic projection. The evidence spread before them made no scientific sense. His genetic code was chaos strands that shouldn't work together, adaptations that contradicted each other, markers from deathworld that should have killed any organism carrying them. Yet there he stood in the holding cell, calm and patient, while the galaxy's greatest minds tried to categorize him. One scholar whispered the forbidden term, death, but even that felt insufficient. Deathworlders, they knew species from harsh planets that had clawed their way to intelligence through suffering and adaptation. This was something else. His DNA read like a war record written in genetic code, each strand a victory, each marker a conquered threat. When they asked him what he remembered, he spoke in a language their translators struggled with, ancient and primal. Fragments came through, jungles where every shadow held death, hunts that lasted days, wars against things with too many teeth and too little mercy. But no stars, no ships, no civilization. His past was violence perfected into art, and his instincts remained sharper than any blade the Council had ever forged. They decided to test him, to understand what they were dealing with. In a reinforced arena, they released a Kranth hunter, a beast that had killed 17 trained warriors before its capture. The creature circled him, claws scarring the metal floor, sensing easy prey. The man didn't move, didn't flinch, simply stood with his hands relaxed at his sides. The Kranth lunge dance stopped mid-lep, crashing to the ground. It approached again, more slowly, then pressed its massive head against his chest and made a sound no one had ever heard from its species before. Submission, not from fear of pain or death, but from recognition of something higher in the hierarchy of existence. The council chamber fell silent. One of the military advisors finally spoke. "He is not one of us. He is older than our civilizations, something that survived where others perished, across alien worlds." Hunters began calling him the Apex, a title that spread through predator species faster than through intelligent ones. When scientists tried to communicate with the beasts to understand, they received only vague impressions and sentient memory, genetic recognition. the acknowledgement of something that had always existed at the top of the food chain. His blood under the microscope told stories that terrified xenobiologists. They found adaptations for processing neurotoxins, surviving extreme temperatures, fighting in thin atmospheres, and crushing pressures. His muscle fibers were denser than any known biology allowed. His reaction time measured in ranges their equipment initially flagged as calibration errors. But the most disturbing discovery came from his immune system. It wasn't defensive, it was aggressive, attacking foreign elements with such efficiency that one scientist compared it to watching a military strike. His DNA adapted in real time to threats, rewriting itself faster than diseases could spread. When they asked him to demonstrate his physical capabilities, he requested weapons. They gave him practice blades, ceremonial things never meant for real combat. He moved through their combat simulation like poetry, written in violence. Every strike economical and devastating, muscle memory from battles he couldn't consciously recall. The training drones, designed to challenge elite soldiers, lasted 17 seconds combined. Security footage showed him not fighting but hunting, predicting movements before they happened, striking at weaknesses the programmers didn't know existed in their designs. The council split immediately. Half saw potential a weapon against the rival empires, a tool to control predator populations, a genetic key to unlock deathworld colonization. The other half saw extinction, a reminder that humanity's ancestors hadn't climbed to the top of the food chain through cooperation but through being better predators than anything else that walked, swam, or flew. Factions formed overnight. Military admirals wanted him cloned, scientists wanted him dissected. Philosophers wanted him erased from history before his existence challenged too many comfortable lies about civilization's superiority over nature. He seemed indifferent to their debates, spending his time in his cell, sketching on the walls with whatever materials they gave him. The images showed a planet with violent oceans, forests where every plant was a weapon, storms that could strip flesh from bone. It resembled Earth in the Council's archives, but older, harsher, less forgiving. A world that would forge apex predators out of primates or kill them in the attempt. The predator migration began without explanation. Wild beasts across a dozen systems started moving, abandoning hunting grounds, ignoring natural prey, traveling toward the council station where he was held. They didn't attack settlements or ships, simply gathered at the edges of civilized space, watching and waiting. Xenobiologists had no explanation. The predators weren't communicating through any detectable means, yet they moved with purpose, drawn by something the scientific instruments couldn't measure. A lone alien historian studying ancient records in the Forbidden Archives found references to a war that predated the Council by millennia. The records were fragmented, deliberately destroyed, but she pieced together enough to send a chilling report. His kind had fought the galaxy's first predators, and one they hadn't domesticated or negotiated with them. They had dominated them so completely that genetic memory of that dominance still echoed through every carnivore's DNA. History had erased humanity's ancestors, but biology remembered. The Council voted on his fate in a session that devolved into shouting matches and drawn weapons. Containment failed when the security systems mysteriously malfunctioned later. Investigations suggested he'd simply observed their patterns long enough to predict maintenance cycles and guard rotations. He walked out of his cell without harming anyone, merely incapacitating those who tried to stop him with pressure points and nerve strikes that shouldn't have worked on alien physics. But he knew exactly where to press, what to target, adapting his knowledge in real time. The predators that had gathered outside followed him as he left the station. A parade of species that had never cooperated before, moving in synchronized purpose. The bounty hunters sent to recapture him vanished into the frontier, their last transmissions showing footage of predators emerging from shadows, responding to calls no equipment could detect. They hunted the hunters with methodical efficiency, and though he gave no verbal commands, every beast seemed to know its role in his strategy. Deep in ancient ruins on a forgotten moon, he found what remained of his ancestors' legacy. The chamber held weapons designed not with technology but with intimate knowledge of how predators moved, thought, and died. He lifted a blade that fit his hand perfectly, its balance suggesting a civilization that had mastered killing so thoroughly they'd turned it into science. Inscriptions covered the walls, and though the Council's translators failed, he read them with genetic memory, understanding not through knowledge but through instinct. This was what humanity had been before they forgot, before safety and civilization dulled the edges that had kept them alive. An alpha predator, larger and more ancient than any known species, challenged him in those ruins. The battle lasted hours, shaking mountains and sending shockwaves through the planet's crust. But when it ended, the Alpha lived subdued, dominated, but not destroyed. He had proven his point without unnecessary death. Dominance wasn't about killing everything that moved. It was about being so dangerous that even apex predators knew not to test you. The footage spread across the galaxy faster than any government could suppress it. Billions watched predators kneeling, armies hesitating, empires questioning their fundamental assumptions about the natural order. Scientists finally published what they'd been afraid to admit. His DNA didn't just adapt, it evolved in real time, rewriting itself in response to challenges. He was evolution's sharpest blade, honed by a world that killed anything less than perfect. Instead of anomaly, species began calling him ancestor, recognizing in him something primal that existed before. Civilization taught them to fear their own instincts. When Redditor packs began overwhelming military installations, not to kill but to free enslaved animals and break breeding programs, the Council realized their mistake. They had assumed control meant power. But true apex predators didn't need to control, they simply existed at the top, and everything else adjusted accordingly. He stood before the reformed council, predators flanking him, and spoke with calm authority. You call me anomaly, your predators call me kin. Which voice do you trust, the one that fears me, or the one that obeys me? The answer came not in words but in actions. Predators across the galaxy began returning to their worlds, the migration reversing as quickly as it had begun. Peace trembled on the horizon, fragile but possible. He had demonstrated that humanity's ancient legacy wasn't cruelty or mindless violence, but something far more terrifying: perfect understanding of the predator's role in the ecosystem, and the willpower to enforce balance when necessary. The Council recorded his DNA into their archives, relabeling it from anomaly to origin, and when he departed on a ship heading toward unmapped space, every predator on the station howled in unison. Travelers began reporting sightings across the galaxy. A lone figure who could end conflicts with a glance, whose presence made predators docile and tyrants nervous. The final revelation came from genetic analysis, completed after his departure. His DNA was human, perfectly and completely, but preserved from an age before humans had been diluted by safety, softened by civilization, taught to fear their own capacity for dominance. He was what they had been when survival meant being better predators than anything else on Earth, when every day was a hunt and every night tested whether you deserved to see sunrise. His DNA matched no known species in the galactic database because the database had been built by civilizations that had forgotten what it meant to be truly wild. But every predator recognized him instantly because their genetic memory reached back further than any archive, remembering when humanity's ancestors had looked into the eyes of saber-toothed cats and dire wolves and decided they would be the ones who survived. Not anomaly, not myth, humanity unbroken, undisputed, eternal apex.